Welcome to the William Hill Sports Book Club, and on today's episode it's Ashes time, so we're talking cricket, and it's a book that made the 2025 long list for the award, The Art of Batting by Jarrod Kimber.
There's been some good books on batting and cricket, obviously great books on batting, on cricket. I wasn't sure there'd been a book that had just said this is how people make runs, right? And I read some older books that were about great batting, but they were really more about the personality of the player or, what it was like to watch them. And I was like, yeah, but where did they score? How did they score, right? And how did they get to the point in their life where they did that?
Jarrod is well known to those who listen to talkSPORT's cricket commentaries. He's the stat man who also has a special way with words, and those skills come through in this book.
You talk about that, the Brendan McCullum line there. You're not going to forget that in a hurry, right? And that is the way of explaining Brendan McCullum. There's sort of just an explosion of sugar that comes out when you're watching him, and some of it hits you in the face and some of it hits the person behind you.
The Art of Batting by Jarrod Kimber is the subject for this episode of the William Hill Sports Book Club. Hi there, I'm Adrian Durham. This is the William Hill Sports Book Club. If you love cricket, The Art of Batting is essential. It covers everything about batting, and the author delivers his top 50 batters of all time. And if you're into sport, who doesn't love a list to get stuck into and disagree with? I mean, no Adam Gilchrist in the top 50. What the jeepers keepers is going on there? We will expand on all of that shortly. I'm joined as ever by a man who's read more books than a librarian with too much time on their hands. He helped compile the long list for the award. Neil Foggin, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great to have you with us, mate. Jarrod Kimber is here as well, the author of the book. How are you?
Very good.
Listen, there's so much to talk about. First of all, do you like cricket?
Yeah, a little bit. It's been a part of my life. Do you know what? I've always people go, when did you start liking cricket? And I was like, I didn't realise other people didn't like cricket. Because I grew up in a family where it's contested whether I was half a week or a week and a half old when I went to watch my dad play for the first time. And my parents still argue about that to this day. But in my family, everyone went out, entire club. It was Camberfield Cricket Club. It was called the Kimberfield Cricket Club. We were there on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, Sundays. So I just assumed that was everyone's life. And then you get to about 8 or 9, you're like, some people like golf and some people go to shopping centres and it just wasn't a thing. So yeah, it's just always been there.
That's brilliant. I'd love that. And that's made you who you are. First of all, congratulations on the book. Congratulations on making the long list as well. It's an incredible achievement. You think about the amount of books that get read for this. You made the long list. How did you feel when you found out?
Yeah, I was very surprised because it's a list book. And I kind of thought the people who were giving out awards would go, I'd rather hear about some obscure guy who played football in the 1800s and was also a drug dealer on the side or something. Those sort of emotional books. And I tried to make this like a poem to batting, but it's still at the end got a big long list in it, and here's all the numbers and why they matter. So I didn't expect to be on this list. So thank you to everyone involved.
That's a list on a list, which is what's not to love
exactly.
About that. And actually, because at the start of the book you say this was originally going to be just a list of the top 50 batters, and I was all the way through reading, and I'm not one of those that goes to the end and reads the last page first. All the way through, I'm thinking, is there going to be a list? I want a list. I want to know its top 50. I want to know who's number one. So we get there in the end. So no spoilers here. But Foggy helped compile the long list. What was it about The Art of Batting that put it on the long list?
Because this could have been very academic, and it could have been a little bit boring. And it's not, because the great thing what Jarrod's done with this book is he's brought examples. He's used human stories, used people to show you the techniques. So it could have been very technical, and it wasn't. And the way he starts the book on the first page of the thing, I thought, what the hell am I reading here? Is this a sports book? Have I got the wrong dust cover on this book? And it was fascinating. And also it's the amount of time and effort. You could tell that in the book. And that's why it deserves its place on the long list.
We have a mutual friend, colleague, John Norman, who's the head of cricket at talkSPORT, who told me on Monday that this took a long time for you to research and write. So how long?
Yeah, I suppose it was probably 2 or 3 years of going through. I'll be honest, what happened was, and you know what it's like when you talk to a publisher, I sort of said to Bloomsbury, I want to write this book in the top 50 batters. And in their mind, they're like, great, it'll go from 50 to number 1, and it'll be really awesome. And then I sent them the first chapter. And as Foggy just said, it's not a normal first chapter for a sports book, right? And I think they just went, what actually are you writing? And so I then got in my head though, I was like, I can't start the book like that and not have the list right. So I got so into my own head. I got, a great Cheyenne who does the research for me. Him and I just got obsessed with this. And like, our WhatsApp is just passing messages of like, are we sure this guy shouldn't be 4 places higher or whatever? Or have you had a look? He wasn't very good in New Zealand, and like, things like that. And so the writing to me comes very naturally. And I'm the worst part. People say, well, how do you get through writer's block? And I was like, I'd never heard of it. It doesn't exist in my world. But the research is where we got stuck. And so, so a good 2 years of the book was researching it to make sure I had it exactly how I wanted. Despite the fact that I know that the list is like completely subjective, right? Like it's nonsense.
Which you made clear.
Yeah.
It is subjective.
But I wanted to do the process right. And as you said, I wanted, it could be a dry topic. So I wanted it to have life all the way through, but I still wanted the list to feel authentic and not just be like, you could go to Reddit or you could go to a cricket forum and see that list. I wanted it to be an original list that had all the work in it. So as John would probably tell you, I do get obsessed with these things, and there is a lot of my obsessive nature in this book.
And in a positive way, it comes through in the book.
I hope in a positive way.
I'm not a cricket expert. I wouldn't even describe myself as one of the big cricket lovers. I can sit and watch cricket. Obviously, I've been to cricket. There are some cricketers, as we'll discuss, that I really admired over the years, but I'm reading through the list thinking, what's going on? How is he so far down? So literally everybody will have something to say about it, but that's one of the joys of it. You talk about the first page of the book, and I'm going to go to, I think it's the penultimate chapter, which is the list. Yes. I think the ball chapter is after that. That chapter really gripped me from the start, okay? So that's the one that lists your top 50 batters of all time. It isn't the list necessarily that really gripped me. It's the start of that chapter. It had the briefest autobiographical detail, and this sentence gripped me. It said, "In my teenage years, everything started falling apart for me." Now, you've got my heart there. I mean, my bottom lip is going. The decisions I made were either self-destructive or just out of fear. And I was thinking to myself, I've admired your work, Jarrod, for a long time, listening to you on our cricket commentaries. And totally in awe of like how you'll just pluck a stat out of nowhere. He hasn't had time to research that, or you'll know this incredible fact. And it's so impressive. But I really don't know you, so who are you?
I'm very lucky. I ended up being a cricket writer. My dad was an amateur cricket coach, and my mum was a librarian. So I've kind of ended up at the pointy end of their two interests.
Book about cricket, yeah.
But yeah, I only found out recently through my son started getting diagnosed with various things. And me and my son are both neurodiverse. We both have dyslexia, and I'm sure in my case, and perhaps in his as well, there's some other diagnoses that we need to get to. And so I was at a very young age doing very advanced schoolwork. And then when I got to a certain point, I think that some of the teachers were like, we can't just have him separate to everyone else. We need to bring him in. And the minute I came back to the class, it just all kind of fell apart, because I either learned something quicker than anyone's ever learnt it, or I don't learn it at all, which meant that I was either bored because I'd already done the work until I frustrated everyone else in the class, or I couldn't work it out, so I would purposely disrupt the class. And it turns out it's just dyslexia, right? And I didn't know this, and because it's a different form of dyslexia, so reading isn't my problem, even writing isn't my problem. I have other issues that come out through my dyslexia. And so when I got to high school, I didn't fit in at all, and it didn't work. And so I got depressed. I went from being I think I was the runner-up of Ducks of the class in primary school to failing English in year 8 and year 9. I was advanced maths, and I was failing maths. I failed PE, which I don't even know how you fail PE, really.
That's quite an achievement.
Yeah, especially for someone who played every sport, right? I wasn't a great athlete, but I'm good enough at every sport to be good. And it sort of, the whole world just sort of collapsed on me. And I have a real overachieving family. We all came, my grandfather was an orphan who ended up being a principal and, running all these different schools. All my uncles and my aunties have these incredible jobs. And I got kicked out of high school twice, right? And there wasn't a single teacher who was like, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's just, we can't have him here. He's disrupting everything. And so I didn't know what to do. So I went from manual job to manual job. I ended up working in call centers, which is, a slight step up on that. At least you're not as physically tired at the end of the day, but mentally it just drains your brain. And I did that for about 10 years, from 17 through to 27. That's what I did. And then I finally had a chance to start writing a little bit more. That was when the internet really took off, and there were blogs and everything. And I started writing, and almost from the time I started writing, I would say I was still amateur, but from a professional sort of mindset, it just sort of all exploded. So yeah, I had a really tough 10 years in there or maybe even 14 years where I knew I was a writer, and I couldn't quite get to the point at where anyone else would think I was a writer. And part of it is the dyslexia as well, because I have a friend who's like, he was the chief scriptwriter on Neighbours for years. And he'd read some of my stuff earlier, and he was like, you get narrative in a level that no one else does, but people can't always understand what you're saying because you move so quickly. So I had to learn how other people's brains worked. And so that took years in the wilderness, right? There wasn't it's not like I got a tap on the shoulder from like a cricket writer or someone in the industry. I started a cricket blog called Cricket with Balls, and I basically went from being unknown to being offered jobs over here. Like I basically got offered a position at the Western Cricketer without having ever been a professional writer before. And that was 14 years of just doing everything wrong in my life. Like, I think I had something like 45 different jobs in that period.
Well, you found your place. It took a little while. And actually, some of the story there, it's a fascinating story, by the way. Some of the story there, Neil, I think in some of the language that the words that you use, we'll go into some of the sentences that are in the book that really blew me away. Some of the imagery you use. I think you can see how, because there was one particular sentence which I can't actually read out on this show because it's just too rude. So, okay. But I was reading it and I thought, wow.
You have to tell me later because I really need to.
That's a good use of words. Then I got to the next bit, like, whoa. But you can see how his mind works and how it transformed into the language in this book.
Yes. And now listening to him now explain, it all makes sense. And you can understand now the frustration you've had. Yeah. And it's come through on the pages. It's brilliant.
It is.
I also, I think I was very lucky as well. Because of dyslexia, you have to be more visual. So I think a lot of writers are more worried about the words, or I'm more worried about how the person reading them will visualize them, because that's how my brain works, right? And I grew up with incredible oral storytellers, right? Like they could tell a story just absolutely brilliantly. And then I still had my mum as a librarian, so she's still feeding me books. So I remember Amazon at one stage were going to, Amazon used to do those singles that they had, those short stories, and they were like, this is like nothing else that anyone's ever written before. And it's because I'm not trained, and I do come from these random different areas than anyone else. But sorry, I didn't mean to shock you with rudeness.
No, it's fine. And I'll tell you off air a little bit later. You'll know exactly what I mean. And obviously cricket played a huge part in your life, which you've already explained. You described the book as, the quote is, an autopsy of how batting works. So why did you feel you needed to write this book?
It's funny, there's so many cricket books, and Foggin must get like 1 million of them every year, right? And quite a lot of them are about old Yorkshire players, right? Or former England players who are a little bit, rascals off the field or whatever. And there's been some good books on batting and cricket, obviously some great books on batting, on cricket. I wasn't sure there'd been a book that had just said, this is how people make runs, right? And, I read some older books that were about great batting, but they were really more about the personality of the player or, what it was like to watch them. And I was like, yeah, but where did they score? How did they score, right? And how did they get to the point in their life where they did that?
But they don't know it. And this comes through in your book. Those batters don't know. It just comes naturally to me. They can't really explain it, can they?
It's the thing I learned in this book, and I've kind of always known this, is, we've got a mutual friend, Darren Goff, right? It's not always easy to talk to Goffy about bowling, because a lot of it came so naturally to Goffy. What you really want to do is find the guy it didn't come naturally to, who still made it to almost that level. And so I talked to AB de Villiers and Brian Lara, and it was incredible to be able to talk to them. But they didn't really help me. And there's a great story in the book, this guy called Bob Knocker-White, who 50 years he stood on cricket grounds. He played for Middlesex for 10 years, Nottingham for 10 years, and then umpired for 30 years. And in the 10 years he was at Nottingham, he was with Garfield Sobers. And he'd be batting with him and go down and go, what should I do? How do I be like... And so Sobers would be like, oh, you just do this, this, and this. And Knocker would go back in the next game and do it and just get bowled. He'd be like, what am I doing wrong? And then he realised they're not the same creatures, right? So for me, it was talking to the guys who were that sort of level below, someone like Nasser Hussain, Chris Rogers, Jimmy Adams. These are all players who had heaps of success in international cricket, but no one would consider them Brian Lara or Joe Root, right? But when you talk to those guys, they had to work their way through it. And that was when... I think that was, for me, that was the moment where I went, that's the person I want to talk to. I want to talk to the person who can talk to me, right? That can also knows what the great players went through and had the connection between both. And once I got to that I think opened the book up a lot more to be able to understand. There's a bit where Chris Rogers talks about batting with David Warner, and he said, I had to deal with the ego of the fact that no one was there to watch me. I might as well be invisible at the other end. And so he becomes a spectator, but while he's batting with one of the most destructive players of all time. That gives you, that's better than me watching or any of us watching, right? Like, you've got an expert in batting who's sitting there almost taking notes at the other end, and then occasionally go, oh, but it's my turn to bat now.
Yeah, better stay in. Some brilliant writing in it. Page 69, Ijaz Ahmed held the bat like an axe murderer. Page 66, the balance shifts like a bowl of jelly in a minivan. And page 137, McCullum was a sawn-off shotgun firing lollipops to sugar-obsessed kids. Brilliant. It's funny as well. The story about how calamari stopped play is hilarious. So I'll not too many spoilers. I want people to read the book as well. It's well worth reading. Where does the wordplay come from? Is that from your mum being a librarian and different books you read?
Yeah, I suppose. I probably, when I was younger, thought I was going to be a stand-up comedian. And so I think I was always interested in sort of, I wanted the thing to be truthful, but I also want you to remember it, right? And so there's a combination, I think, in stand-up comedy of those two things. And what I found out when I did stand-up comedy was I wasn't that interested in standing on the stage, but I really liked the writing of it. And so I ended up sort of moving into writing a little bit more directly. So I think there's that. I'm probably a frustrated filmmaker and musician also at heart, right? And so when I'm writing, I'm more thinking from a script perspective than I am from a book perspective. And so, my heroes are songwriters, and they have to be a little bit more quippy and, and everything else, or, great screenwriters, and the same sort of thing of they want people to remember the thing. So I think there's always been a bit of an element of that as well in there. And I remember having this conversation with other writers where they were like, people won't take you as seriously if you've got jokes in it. And I was like, yeah, I can get that. Like, I understand your general principle, but I just want people to remember the point I'm trying to make, right? And like, you talk about that, the Brendan McCullum line there, you're not going to forget that in a hurry, right? And that is the way of explaining Brendan McCullum. Like, there's sort of just an explosion of sugar that comes out when you're watching him, and some of it hits you in the face and some of it hits the person behind you, right? And he's not like a sniper. Like, being able to do that, I think if you're in your head, you have an image of that. And I say that comes back to dyslexia, right? Of like, in my head, I have to know what it looks like. And I'm like, I know what Brendan McCullum with a shotgun looks like. I understand that.
I think that some of the writing is fantastic. And you and I will talk about this in a moment, Foggy. Let me just read some of it out because page 27, there's a great bit of writing. It's a description of pace bowling. Trying to think who it was. Sean Tate's pace bowling. He gets a short ball that just wants to destroy him. That was pace, raw, violent, and uncontrolled. I mean, we can actually feel that. You can picture that. So that to me is great writing. And another piece as well, a few pages later, if I can, at the top of page 31. This is about Virat Kohli. He was dogmatic. He was dominant. He was floating above the crease like a supernatural being. Wow. I mean, you can see him floating above the crease. It's just... And what I love about this, there's so many stats in the book, and you are a stat man as well. It's rare that you get, Neil, a stat man who can deliver the writing and the imagery as well. The two combined make it a great book.
Yeah, it's balanced. It all works. Because I'm not a massive cricket fan, and we do get a lot of cricket books every year. And sometimes you can get bored because it's all stats and it's all data, but it's the writing in this book which makes it... And it makes you laugh. And the other thing as well is that we watch a lot of television shows or films and you think that was all right. Then you read the book and the book is so much better. This is, because it brings everything. You can see it. I visualise everything and he sat there and think, well, that makes perfect sense. And then your brain is going off. Your imagination is running riot because of this book.
Yeah, I really wanted to pare the stats back because I didn't start as a stats guy, right? Like, the stats thing was really... because cricket was developing in a way where I was like, I can't tell the stories I want to tell because I don't have the information I need, right? And so I went off to get the stats and learn about it, and then that came back, but I started as a feature writer. Like, if you go back to when I first started working in the UK, it was as a feature writer. And so in this book, we're really careful of like, there's probably still a few stats that I think if you took me back through it, I'd probably take some out, but I probably took like 70% of the stats out because I was like, no, I have to be able to tell this story without just putting a number on the page.
Wait, 70% you took out?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because when we started, as I said before, I got obsessed with, this guy and this is what he's done, and we invented algorithms for this book. Like, we haven't even got into that sort of nerdy stuff. But I didn't want to be sitting there going, let me explain how the algorithm works to you. I want to be able to say, this is why we did this algorithm. This is why it matters to this player, and this is why it matters to this player. But I'm not going to sit here and give you the exact number because it doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is we've done the work. You can trust us, hopefully, throughout the book that we've done the work. And now, this is what that means. And here is the person with holding the bat like an axe murderer or whatever that may be.
I watched a lot of cricket, Test cricket in the 80s, so I grew up with the West Indies Quicks. And there was one time when we were in the talkSPORT office at the old building where Darren Gough had a tennis ball in his hand and I said, bowl it at me. It's the biggest mistake I've ever made. He bowled it at me full pelt and it was a tennis ball. And it was one of the scariest. This is Darren Gough 10 years after finishing. It was so rapid. And it made me realise, that was the moment I realised, geez, cricket is really dangerous. So there's a bit in the book, page 146, and my post-it note says, cricket is dangerous, exclamation mark. Let me read it to you. The worst place to field in cricket was Silly Point to Viv Richards for a spinner. It was a war crime by the bowling captain to send anyone under the cap. It was rare to wear a helmet back then. Your job was to get ready for a small edge onto the pad that would balloon up and then fling yourself forward for the catch. The reality was he was going to hit the ball hard at you and test your commitment to safety. You can picture somebody just sitting there and they're getting a ball smashed at them by one of the greatest batsmen of all time, Viv Richards. Yeah. And it's truly dangerous, cricket. It's
a different kind of courage. And I think that if you've played, American football or rugby or Aussie rules football, those sorts of sports where you're hit all the time, that's one kind of courage. But I remember seeing an Aussie rules player actually face Sean Tate. It's funny, you mentioned him before. So Sean Tate's probably the second fastest bowler that's ever lived, right? And he faced him in a studio, and this guy was a big guy, like 6'5", and well known. And you could see in his eyes, suddenly he was like, I've made a mistake. And that's before the ball's come out. Because it's a different kind of courage to know that ball's coming at you. And, I'm lucky enough through talkSPORT and other places to have worked with Bumble a lot. And Bumble, the way that Bumble explains it is, he talks about the Wild West. Right? Bumble's a brilliant storyteller. And when you realize that, and it's the one thing that I think I had in common with a lot of great batters is I had this argument, I do a podcast with Robbie Uthappa, a great Indian player. And we always have this thing, he's like, you don't know what it's like to face 90 miles an hour. And I went, yes, I do. Because I'm a bad player. Everyone's too fast for me. Right? So that's the one thing that we all have in common with these great batters is we know what it's like when the ball's coming at us too quickly. And it's terrifying because you want to back away, and that's the worst thing you can do. You want to back your pads, but your legs are shaking, right? It's a completely different kind of courage that cricket has. And as you say, and then you have someone like Viv Richards, who is actually, you are meter foggy away from him. And he's got this incredible backlift and he wants to hurt you because he doesn't want you there. He sees that as a slight on his, masculinity, that you're willing to stand that close to him, right? So cricket does bring about these genuine different kinds of courage than I think other sports have.
Yeah, the ball is so hard. I mean, I've had this discussion with a number of people. In fact, when we did this show with Jimmy Anderson, I asked him the question, do you think the ball's too hard? And it's just such a basic question. Were you actually a decent player?
I think decent might be pushing it.
Okay.
Look, I could play. My biggest problem was I was very good at lots of things, but not particularly good at anything that elevated me to that next level. When I played at quite a good cricket club back in Melbourne, and the coach and the selectors would all listen to what I had to say about the game. So I figured I knew a lot about the game, but I just don't quite have the physicality that I'm needed to. So I was a leg spinner, but I was a bit too slow. And so...
Too slow to be a leg spinner?
Yeah, because this is the thing about leg spin. If you think about Shane Warne, he's got those big, powerful shoulders and he's got big hands. I've got tiny little writer's hands and I don't have powerful shoulders. And so I can spin the ball, but by the time it gets down, a really good player has just got there. So, I had a situation when I got to the top level where a guy hit 5 sixes off me in a row. And the last ball, he purposely hit it for 4 because I think he just didn't want to break break me.
Broke your spirit.
It was very clear to me what level I was at in cricket. Yeah. I can converse with the guys and they know that I understand the game and that I've played it at a decent level, but they also know, I mean, Geoffrey will tell you stories about, how bad I bowled in a particular game, although I did. Me and Geoffrey had a partnership together once. So I can play, but not at any sort of professional level. I was certainly a long way behind that. I was probably better at other sports, but cricket just kept pulling me back in.
Well, there's no doubt you understand the game. I think that obviously comes through. There's some great writing in it, as I've said before. Mitchell Johnson versus A.B. de Villiers in the book. Some good description of what set Richards apart from the rest as well. I'm also fascinated by the section in chapter 4. It's called Testless, that chapter. It highlights some talented players who didn't quite cut it at test level. Graham Hick, Mark Ramprakash. Yeah.
Michael Bevan, I think.
Bevan, yeah, is in there as well. Those kind of guys. The former West Indies skipper Jimmy Adams is quoted a lot in the book. Some really interesting stuff he says. He talks about the wiring of these guys, uses the word wiring, being a reason why they didn't establish themselves. So what do you think he means by that?
So Jimmy Adams is a fascinating guy. So he's playing with Brian Lara, but he actually ends up at one stage being the #1 ranked test batter in the world while Sachin is playing, Lara's playing, it's ridiculous. And then he kind of has a bit of a breakdown. And I think he understands the mental side of things a lot better because I wouldn't say he got yippy, but there's certainly an element of that. And so he was with the best players on earth. He's a scholar of batting as well, but he also understands what mental health can do to you and what those things can do. And what he was saying is, and he pushed me really hard on this. He said, go and find footage of Michael Bevan. Everyone said he wasn't good against a short ball. I know he was. So it's not that he wasn't good against a short ball. There's something about Test cricket that challenged the psychology of some of these guys, and they never quite made it. So Graham Hick, we know, was an absolute genius. Doesn't make it. Mark Ramprakash is still one of the best batters I've ever seen in my life, and yet we're sitting here when he averages 25 in Test cricket. He just didn't make it. And so what Jimmy Adams is saying is that sometimes there's a psychology of cricket which does not allow the most talented players to go. And I know you grew up watching Alan Lamb, right? So before you even asked me an Alan Lamb question, I'll tell you, Alan Lamb's another one. Alan Lamb averages almost 50 playing in first-class cricket. He's a genius. You watch him play and you're just like, oh my God, this is what I want to watch. He never made it work at the international level. And there's a few specific things that I think change. One is that when you're playing most cricket, it's like playing football. You play against the team and then you play against them 15 weeks later, right? When you play Test cricket, you're playing against these same bowlers for 10 straight innings. And the greatest bowlers of all time, Anil Kumble and Glenn McGrath can tell you they've both taken, over 500 wickets, but they can actually tell you what 364th wicket was. They still remember that. So you're going up against an elephant, right? That remembers every single detail and is very skillful. And I think if you're Graham Hick or Mark Ramprakash or Michael Bevan, they work out little things that are not quite right and they just keep pushing and pushing at them. Whereas in first-class cricket, the level below, you might not face that bowler for another 3 months. And so I think there's a psychological thing. I think there's a tactical thing. And some people just don't handle that side of it. It's such a weird sport because, if you play in a 3 test match series as a test batter and you fail in those, you might not play for another 6 months, right? So you get 6 bats, maybe 5, right? And then you don't play for 6 months. The pressure that puts on you as a human being is, again, it's just, cricket has unique psychological pressures. You have a bad golf tournament, you just go out. 3 days later, you've been touring for 2 days to get to your next venue, right? You're hardly even thinking about it. That doesn't happen in cricket.
There's so much to talk about. We could do at least 3 hours on this. I want to just quickly mention that there's a lot of healthy references to women's cricket in the book as well. One thing I want to briefly touch on is that I'm obsessed with the nutmeg. Okay, which it's page 59 you describe. Just explain what it is for those that don't know what the nutmeg is.
Basically, batters generally have their feet shoulder width apart, right? And so there is always a gap between your legs. But traditionally in cricket, there was a time where people could sort of play that shot because if you're a left-hander and the angle, you could sort of get the ball back between the stumps and your body, right? And then as we get more power stancey in cricket, and you get Nat Siva Brunt has her feet wider than shoulder width apart. She suddenly realizes that there's a gap between her legs, right? And so when they're trying to choke you off from your power shots, they're trying to find holes. You talk about with baseball swings, right? Cricket's kind of similar to that. And so Nat just thought to herself, well, if I just hit the ball down here, I can hit it through my legs to the gap where there's not going to be a fielder. And it's a brilliant thought. She's not the only one who's ever had it. She maybe was one of the better players to do it. generally after a while, teams wise up and it slows down. But yeah, it's an incredible thing because this is what I find really fascinating about cricket, is things that happen in the 1800s briefly, disappear, and then suddenly the game changes and they're brought back again. And I think the nutmeg is probably something that had existed well back, like 120 years earlier, and then she worked it out. But yeah, it comes from a power position, but it's a finesse shot through your legs. It's nutmegging yourself, really, and nutmegging the fielders, I suppose, as much as anything.
A finesse shot is an understatement. I mean, you've got to get that spot on. Bottom of page 152 is a wonderful description of Matthew Hayden, the great Aussie batter. And let me read it because it's worth it. It's such a fantastic description. Here it goes. It's impossible to explain how much bigger Hayden is than normal batters. For generations, smaller batters dominated for a few reasons. Pitch is often kept low, so being tall made that difficult. Some experts, like Mark Nicholas, believe that it is easier to be coordinated with shorter limbs. You needed to be nimble on your feet, so being bigger naturally slowed you down. Hayden is 188 centimetres, so above 6 foot, and then some. But he is massive in every single way. Just a Moreton Bay fig tree come to life. So Moreton Bay's Brisbane, Queensland, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if Moreton Bay fig tree is like a Lord of the Rings tree that's like so wide and branches rooting out everywhere.
It'd be the base of them would be bigger than the entire studio that we have here, right?
Yeah.
Like they are ridiculous. And when you see Matt Hayden, it's funny watching people react to him in real time. So he does all the commentary now. When he walks through the commentary box, everyone stops to look at him because he's so much bigger than any other cricketer we've ever seen, right? He looks like a rugby player, right? And he would look like a biggish rugby player. Like he's not a small guy for a rugby player. And yet you compare him to Sachin Tendulkar, who is about the size of this table, and Don Bradman, who was shorter than Sachin Tendulkar. And so I wanted people to understand the force. And when Matt Hayden on top of that was coming down the wicket at you, and you listen to bowlers just go, what do you do when a tree trunk is moving at you? Like it's something else. And so I wanted people to understand that is not a normal thing to be for a batter.
That's a great description, and obviously a lot of people might not understand or have seen what a Moreton Bay fig tree looks like, so they'll look it up and then they'll realise he looks like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a fantastic descriptive piece. Kevin Pietersen is somebody that we've interviewed a few times on talkSPORT, and through Goffey I've spent a bit of time with him as well. I was amazed how big he is. I had no idea just what a giant he is. So he's way taller than people realise. He just squeezes into your top 10 England players, batsmen ever.
Yeah.
Never mind top 10 batters of all time. He just gets into the top 10 England batsmen ever. Now, I'm going to bow to your superior knowledge here, but I was shocked by that. So some of the old timers ahead of him, I've got no idea.
Yes,
you've got way more knowledge of those than I have. But for me, KP is the number one. He's absolute box office. So why don't you like him?
I mean, he's commentated at talkSPORT, so we've worked together. I've known KP for quite a few years now. His record is, if this was an entertainment book, he probably sneaks into the top 10 of all time, right? But because he's KP and the way he played, there's a great story. I can't remember if it's in the book or not. I might have cut it in the end. But there's a great story of him playing against Australia, where Australia's like, oh wait, he flicks everything in the air on the leg side. We'll just put in 2 short mid wickets. And he looks over in disgust and he flicks the next one in the air through the gap. And he goes, I'll do this all day, guys. I'll do this all day. You can put as many fielders as you want there. I'll put it. And that is why he was successful, but it's also why he failed. Because he doesn't need to do that, right? That means they've moved a field for somewhere. There's another gap available for him now. And he's like, no, I'm going to take you on exactly where you want me to take you on, and I'm still going to beat you. And I think there was that element of KP. And, KP is actually, he's incredibly self-assured and certain in life. But he's also a kind of fractured person. Like if you listen to him, there's a great story, which I can't remember again if it was in the book, of him. I happened to see this innings randomly, where it was like at the end of his career and he's facing a big fast bowler, a young fast bowler who could have been the best bowler in the world, but unfortunately never quite clicked for him. And KP looks up and goes, I can't face this. This guy's too fast for me. Like, what do I do? I just don't, maybe I have to retire. I'm finished, right? So he knew his limitations. And so what he does the whole time is, I doubt that Kevin Pietersen ever studied game theory. But if you watch it, that's what he does. He's like, I'm going to take a risk now so that if this comes off, I will be seen as an absolute genius. And if it doesn't come off, I give it a go. So he has these incredible high highs, but lots of low lows. And how do you compare that to someone like Alistair Cook, who grinds you out? And so there's no one in the world who would disagree with the fact that you'd rather watch KP than Alistair Cook. But Alistair Cook was good in so many places, and KP has very high highs and very low lows, and there's something within that. I still think that there is a level of genius within KP, and his career completely matches with like me starting to be a professional cricket writer and understand the mechanical side of these things. And I was like, so when I started, every English cricket writer was like, he's a maverick, he doesn't know what he's doing. And I was like, I think this is actually like next level batting. And he's thinking about the game in a way that you guys aren't thinking about. And it turned out that that's what it was. And now we see everyone try what KP does. Like, you know, you see Rishabh Pant being like, yeah, there's 3 guys on the boundary, but I can also hit 4 sixes this over and you won't bowl this guy again. So I'm just gonna hit the 4 sixes. And if I go out, I go out. But next time I'll hit the 4 sixes, right? That wasn't how Test cricket was played. So KP was ahead of his time. And I think English cricket writing wasn't ready, or English cricket media wasn't ready for that because he was an alien. And so I wanted to put him in the book because of that, but I also have to be honest that there are sometimes he wasn't very good and he did fail and that he did go missing. And so how do you compare that to someone else who doesn't go missing, right? And so it's a weird balance of, you know, the most famous one in the book is I have Sunil Gavaskar ahead of Viv Richards, which has upset a lot of people who saw both of them play. And I was like, yeah, if you're asking me which one I want to watch, you know, I love Sunil Gavaskar, I'm not watching him. But if you look at what Sunil Gavaskar did compared to Viv Richards, I think you would have to argue that there's a case for him to be higher than him. And it's the same with Alistair Cook and Kevin Pietersen. No one's paying. No one's like, I can't wait to get down and watch Alistair Cook nudge the ball off his hip for 1. We want to see KP take on the 2 fielders or try and hit a 6, right? But this wasn't just about what you looked like. It wasn't just sex appeal. It was what you did for the team.
Yeah, I must admit, I was looking through the 50 and I was looking for Joe Root and I blanked and missed his name, and I thought, he hasn't got Joe Root in the 50. So obviously Joe Root is in the 50.
He had the biggest movement during the book. So Virat Kohli was the player that, when I started the book, I was like, every Indian fan's going to complain I've got Virat Kohli too low. And then he didn't make another run from the moment I started writing the book. And now they all complain he's too high. But it was Joe Root who kind of moved, because I'm watching him going, oh, he's reached another level now. And then it was like, he's just on the verge of that sort of untouchable level. And in 2 years' time, he might be there. So the update of that book, he might be a little bit higher.
Yeah, we'll talk about Joe Root in Australia very shortly. So just a couple of... On Kevin Pietersen, I went to see his penultimate T20 innings for Surrey. So his last one, he hit a 4. That was it. But his penultimate one, he came in and he smashed it around. I was looking at the innings the other day and I was so privileged to be there. He hit 1 4, 5 6s, and I think he got 54, something like that. But I can remember everybody's eyes were glued to the pitch, just watching him, and that sticks with me. That's one of my greatest sporting memories, being there to witness such an incredible display of T20 batting. But there's some of the other batsmen. You mentioned Alan Lamb, who I love. Graham Gooch is another one I love.
Graham Gooch is probably the one I've got the most, because he doesn't quite make the top 50. He was probably... I mean, everyone's 51st, right? But he's probably 50, 51, 52, 53.
I think you said down Adam Gilchrist's 51st, isn't he?
Yeah, I think probably Gooch is 52nd and Gale is 53rd. That's off the top of my head at the moment, anyway. And
Are you going to do another book with the next 50? Or?
Well, honestly, from the moment I put it in, I think I wrote it in the book. Like, the list changed almost from the moment I sent it in, and then it changed once they hit publish, and I would change it again now. Like, I would make small changes with it. But Gooch was the one that I think that's, for so many English people, he has this incredible, like, they were so terrible and he was so good. And he was so good against the West Indies. But unfortunately, he just doesn't make the runs overall to compare to some of these other players. Like, it's really hard to make that case. But what I loved about Gooch is he's a pretty ordinary player in his 20s, and then he becomes a genius in his 30s. And that becomes a theme of the book of, is there something to be said of the greatest technicians are actually the ones who can go on over the age of 35 when the reflexes go, the feet go and everything else, and they're still making runs? And I think Gooch definitely gets a big bump because of that.
And this leads to your question. Every single episode of this, what's the next book?
Yes, what's the next book?
I haven't signed up for The Art of Bowling yet, but I'm still waiting for a potential offer on that one.
Do you need to see how this goes, or
it's gone okay? I think it's sold
long listed. Come on,
it's long listed. It sold very well. I don't think it sold as well in England as they wanted it to. It sold very well in India. It was the #1 cricket book in India for months on end.
Didn't sell well in England. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, so hopefully everyone can come up now. I'll look at every camera directly until someone does it. But yeah, it's all good in England, but not like life-changing. And so the problem with me is that my books, this is not a book about English cricket, right? Most books written in England are about English cricket. And, I think if you get to, the point, the position of someone like Tim Wigmore, who's now very well known for his books, this is by far my best-selling book. But it's best-selling book in multiple regions, not one. And when you get book deals at this level in cricket, you generally get them, people want an Australian cricket book or an Indian book or an English book. So Art of Bowling, I know what Art of Bowling is going to be. It's much easier to get to some of the greatest bowlers of all time. I'm lucky enough, I've already interviewed Shane Warne, so I haven't missed out there. It's a bit harder to find older bowlers. I don't know if it's just because there's something about the physicality that they don't live as long as batters seem to live on forever. Old fast bowlers, not a lot of them left, but I've got a couple of leads on some good guys. Sean Pollock's has agreed to be interviewed, and I want to talk to his father as well, who was a great bowler back for South Africa in the 1960s. So I've got a couple. So that's that.
But you got the art of fielding, the art of captaincy, the art of umpiring.
I think I would do the art of batting, the art of bowling. I think the next one will be trying to work out why the greatest cricketers are the greatest cricketers. But I have another book that's a biography that I'm about to release. Unfortunately, I'm not quite ready to give it to you at the moment. But I would say it's one of the most important cricketers of the last 25 years. And it's a book about their place in the culture that they come from and how they have been involved in it. So I really want to do the art of bowling because I'm more of a bowler by heart than a batter. Batting books probably sell better, but I want to get back to this. I've never written a book about one person before, and I really want to get into that sort of thing. You know, I grew up reading the great American sports writers, and you know, people like Bazball and Norman Mailer and those sorts of guys. And I've never written that book yet. And I think the next topic is that, and then the art of bowling will certainly come after that because bowlers deserve their due.
The stuff you write about Geoff Boycott, I think, is absolutely mesmerising. It's fantastic.
I believe he's the only person, and he'll probably deny this, but I believe he's the only person on the list who's unhappy with how low he is.
Right, okay.
I've had 2 batters complain that they're too high.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Are you allowed to name them?
I mean, no. One's Rahul Dravid.
Rahul Dravid, right?
Yeah,
okay.
he was
He's self-effacing though.
Yeah, but I said. He's just like that. And I was like, Rahul, you're obviously not too high. Shut up. The other one was more in passing of like, I've heard I'm this number. And I was like, if you ever want to have a beer, I'll explain why. I heard that Boycott, but I don't think Boycott's read the book. I think someone just told him where he was. And he was like,
right.
I should be, 10th or wherever he thought he should be. It could be made up because you know how everyone in cricket just likes to attribute stories to Boycott. But sorry, you were talking about...
No, I love the fact that he's such a selfish batsman, and it's what made him what he was, made him the great that he was. And I was thinking, Foggy, if only we had a forthright, stubborn Yorkshireman to comment on Geoff Boycott with us, Neil Foggin.
I don't know what you're saying. How rude of you.
But what's the Yorkshire view of Yorkshire's finest?
I think it's mixed.
Yeah.
I think there's a mixed. I think also it's down to your age as well. And I think, but that's what you want. You want characters who are Marmite. You're either going to love them or hate them. No one wants someone middle of the road, and Geoffrey does that.
He does, yeah. I think some of the descriptions of what he was doing out in the middle and showing that selfish side, people will hate it, but you're right, love it at exactly the same time.
This is the big thing I really wanted to get into for this book of I think there is an inbred selfishness in batting that doesn't exist in bowling. So I can't remember who told me this, but I think it was one of the Indian cricketers I talked to at one stage said to me that if you think about it, batting is capitalism and bowling is socialism. So you have to kind of do it in a team. You have to work. Whereas batting is like, even if I'm batting in a partnership, I still want to get one more than the guy at the other end. Like I'm always trying to win at that side of things. And it's like, if you look at Boycott and Callis and Shivner and Janrapal, and Steve Waugh you throw in there as well, those 4 guys are almost always on the list of the most selfish cricketers of all time. And I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't you rather have them than like someone who couldn't average? They kept your side afloat. Did they do it for personal milestones and everything else? Were they sometimes too mechanical? And I think that in Boycott's case, his record in wins is really strong. Like, I went out of my way to be like, I think Ian Chappell in the book's like, you never worry about Boycott because if he made runs, it was a draw. And it's like, that's not what the record says, right? That's not what the records say. So, look, and also I think with Boycott, he's become a caricature in many different ways. People under 30 don't know how good he was as a cricketer. They just disappeared, right? And so I really want to say, look, he was this good, but he was a complicated guy on and off the field. Like, there's no getting around that. But there's a level of genius in Boycott. But, maybe like the great entrepreneurs, that genius was pretty much about how he was happy to tell everyone how great he was. Like, he would have been an incredible, startup entrepreneur, wouldn't he? Like Boycott, because he would be doing the great thing and then telling you about it the entire time. Like there's a lot of Elon Musk in Geoffrey Boycott, I think.
On this episode of the William Hill Sports Book Club, we have Jarrod Kimber, part of talkSPORT's award-winning cricket commentary team and author of the long-listed book, The Art of Batting. And Jarrod, Perth, 21st of November, the Ashes get underway. Page 138 in your book, 138 to 144, focuses on Bazball. It's a fascinating read. Will it work this winter down under for England?
It will have its moments. I think the biggest problem with Bazball on those pitches is that Australian pitches have changed and they're very bowler dominant at the moment. And so taking risks against one of the greatest bowling attacks ever assembled on a wicket that is favouring them is probably not going to work for you long term. But when it does work, as we've seen before, the thing about Bazball is test bowling, bowlers are, the aggressors. And Bazball flips that. Right, and it says, no, I'm going to punch you in the mouth before you punch me in the mouth. And so that brings up challenges that test bowlers are not used to going up against. And even though they've gone up against Bazball a little bit and they've understand it and they have their plans, I think it was Rahul Dravid was the coach of India, and they were like, we know what we're doing. We've got these plans. They're not that good. And then Ollie Pope makes almost a double century, and they're in the change room going, are we wrong? Because you're not expecting that to happen. And that's what Bazball does to you. It's like everything we know about cricket, and now we're just going to, just flip it on you. And I think that's the issue. That is why it could work in Australia. I just think the Australian bowling lineup's too good for it to work consistently.
Actually, we were just talking about Kevin Pietersen. Do you think he sits there watching Bazball thinking, I should be playing now, this is made for me?
I think that Kevin Pietersen is probably the natural evolution of where cricket was going, but he's also an outlier in that he did it before everyone else.
Yeah, like the IPL stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
So the thing about Bazball is, I think if you don't know anything about cricket, you think it's reckless. And if you're not really studying it, you think, oh, it's just them playing attacking. They're actually not doing that. They're doing exactly what KP did. They're like, we're not that good at batting, so we're going to take a bunch of risks so that we can set the field up. Like if you're a chess player, you want to set the board up in a way that you can't be exploited. And that's what they're trying to do. They're literally setting the field up in a way, and sometimes the bowling unit, in a way that they can't be attacked. That's what KP did. Right? All of his risks were there for a reason. And that's what England do now. And, you look at you look back at some of the greatest players, it's not as if this is new. It's that they're doing it on wide scale. Like, Viv Richards did it. Garfield Sobers had moments of this. Vic Trumper did it for Australia in like the early 1900s.
Trumper the Thumper.
Yeah, but they didn't. But the team still went, oh, that's a bit risky. Maybe he's a genius. And now we're like, well, Ollie Pope's not a genius, but we can make sure that Ollie Pope has the field that he wants to bat against. And it's as simple as that. So you attack so that you can manipulate the game. So I think there's a lot of sense in it, but if you're a casual fan, you're probably just like, why are they playing that shot? Like, why is Harry Brook walking across his stumps and getting bowled at Lords? But when you look at it and you look at the field, you're like, oh, he's done that because they've moved the field. If he hits this for 6, what's India's next option? They're out of ideas, and that's the genius of Bazball. And when it wins really well, and when it fails really poorly. The issue is, if you've ever done any gambling before, you'll understand that when you're in front, you don't have to take as many risks. And I think that's what England have now going, oh, we don't need to take the risk when we're in front. We need to take the risk when it's 50-50 or when we're behind.
In terms of batting and the Ashes, I've asked some talkSPORT people and guys I know, basically, who or what we should look out for in this Ashes series regarding the batting. So John Norman, I mentioned again, our head of cricket, said, outside of the obvious Root and Smith, he goes for Harry Brook and Travis Head. They score quickly, top orders are brittle, so their ability to turn a game in a couple of sessions could be crucial.
Yeah, I think number 5 has, and it probably, the book comes out just before we see this change. Otherwise, I might have put a little bit on it in the book. Where number 5's actually become where you have your most dangerous player now. Whereas, for generations, it might have been at number 3 or number 4, and now it's number 5. And the number 5s, like Rishabh Pant, Travis Head, Harry Brook, are like nuclear weapons. Like, if the game is 50-50, they might have won it within 2 hours. And it's, without getting too boring, it's about the ball has changed. There's a new delivery called the wobble ball that's changed all these different things. And so your top 4 now, we're seeing great teams around the world just going, it doesn't matter who bats at number 3. Whereas in the book, number 3 is, Don Bradman and Ricky Ponting and Viv Richards. And now it's like, we'll put a bowler at number 3, right? Because we want our good player to come in at number 5 when the ball's a little bit older and we can do damage. And so Harry Brook and Travis Head are that damage. And they've been given this free rein, right? And Both of those guys grew up playing limited overs cricket. They see the game differently. They are the next generation of Kevin Pietersen, right? And that's how they think about the game. And it's incredible. You know, watching Travis Head bat is like, there is an element of like watching a heavyweight boxer who goes into the ring who's not that fit. And you're looking at him going, he's a bit scruffy, isn't he? And then he hits the first time and you're like, oh, I get it, right? He doesn't need the gym like the other guys do. He's just, you know, country strong, right? That's what Travis Head is like. And then Harry Brook is like, he's like a million different ideas floating around at any one stage. The problem with Harry Brook is he's almost too talented to just be like, settle down, this is what you need to do. But he's like, I could probably hit that ball from wide outside over there if I had to. In fact, maybe I'll just do that now just to see if I can.
Steve Harmison, have you heard of Steve?
Yeah.
He says, in a series that is very evenly matched, England, for me, have a batting unit that can take the game away from Australia in an explosive manner. But we'll have to be mindful of the size of the boundaries, as the grounds in Australia are massive. Very interesting. Australia will go a different way, absorbing the game, taking the bowlers into their third and fourth spells and trying to grind England down. Do you agree with all that?
Yeah, so Australian grounds are massive. Have you been to any of the Australian grounds?
Yeah, not many, no, Sydney.
Yeah, so Sydney's a decent size. MCG's just huge. Perth Stadium's huge. Adelaide Oval has a long, one down. There's a story in the book about KP trying to hit a six into the breeze at the Wacker. And I think he's a little bit in his head is thinking, well, I could probably cover this boundary, but he's not understanding that it's just bigger. There's an extra 5, 10, 15 metres. You know, they used to run, before they brought the ropes in at the MCG, they used to run fives. Right, like it's that
run
big.
Fives.
It is such a big. Also, it's funny watching a batter after he's run a five. He's like emotionally doesn't know how to handle it. He can barely breathe. Right, they're not made for that. So I think the big grounds play a part. But yeah, I think the other thing is Australia probably has one player at the moment that can take the game away from you and Travis Head, and everyone else is more of a plotter. Where England have 3, 4, 5, 6 players who can take the game away. So there's very different methods between the two different sides. England has a better batting lineup than Australia, but they're also going up against a much better bowling lineup.
Chris Adams used to play for England. Good pal of mine. He told me for England, opening partnerships will be a bonus, i.e. they're not very good. So runs will have to come from Root, Smith and Brook. He also said Head and Smith crucial for the Aussies as well. Webster could be exciting, he said.
Yeah, again, you see, it's that same pattern of where are the runs going to come from further down the order, right? So in Australia's case, hopefully number 4, because that's where Steve Smith is still batting. And in England's case, Root is not as important as Smith, just because there's a better batting lineup around Root. But once you get to Root, you get to the strength of the batting afterwards. No one's expecting that. We think we know what Australia's batting order is going to be. And you've got 2 players who are not suited to their positions who are going to be in the top 3. You've got Zach Crawley, who has one of the lowest batting averages in the history of the game, opening the batting for England. You've got Ollie Pope, who possibly, if he fails, will be dropped after 1 or 2 test matches. No one's expecting any runs from the top. So if either team can get runs from the top, that works quite well, but it's that further down. And what Australia's done recently with guys like Bo Webster and Alex Carey is they're batting a little bit deeper now than they used to, which they have to because, you know, Alex Carey's a handy player at number 7 and England have Jamie Smith, who looks like a freak at number 7. So that Australia has to wring as many runs out of their batting lineup as possible, whereas England can be a little bit more careless because they have more talent.
We love Joe Root, don't we? It's the chicken shop story at the start of
My
Jimmy
favourite
Anderson's.
stories.
It's brilliant. Isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
We need to find that chicken shop in Leeds.
We do.
So my pal Sal, who you know, who works at talkSPORT, loves his cricket. Joe Root hasn't scored a century in Australia. This is the most amazing thing, and I didn't realise this because you think Joe Root scored runs every. Never scored a century in Australia. No, okay, maybe he was young first time he went. I think it was COVID times, second time he went. I don't know.
That would have been the 3rd time. So yeah, he's been enough times that he should have made
okay.
one.
I'm making excuses here.
Do you know what? It's really interesting. So Ricky Ponting is quite high up on the list, right? And Joe Root's ahead of him on the list. And a lot of people are like, well, Ricky Ponting was better. And he made hundreds everywhere, and Joe Root hasn't done that. And I was like, yeah, Ricky Ponting averaged 25 in India, right? He made 100 in India, but that's all he did. If you look at Joe Root, I think he averages 35, 36 in Australia. I find it hard to believe that there's an overriding thing that says he can't make runs in Australia. I just don't think he's gone on to make the one big score. You know, if you look at Shubman Gill, who played against England this summer, he was averaging about 34 or something, and then he makes the huge score in is it Manchester? I can't remember. I was at whichever ground I was at. He batted for a long time. Edgbaston? I'm trying to think.
Still there now.
Do you know how I remember things? I try and remember it from what the press box looked like when I was at the ground. So he made that big, and he changed his average. Root only needs one big score in Australia to change his average, and then people will stop talking about it.
But do you think it's a mental thing with him now?
I think that specifically, Pat Cummins, if you were building a bowler in a lab to bowl to Joe Root, you would build Pat Cummins. And he's gone up against Pat Cummins an awful lot, and he might not have to go up against him as much this time. So it's interesting to see if the other Australian bowlers work out what Cummins did. But Cummins basically is like a surgeon, and you have to be a surgeon to go through Joe Root because there aren't many weaknesses there. And Cummins doesn't allow you to score singles. Joe Root's superpower is just not being on strike, right? He just gets to the other end. It's so unsexy what he does, but it's such next level genius. So without Cummins there, I think he has a better chance. I think realistically, regression to the mean, he probably makes 100. But if it's a really low-scoring series, he might make a 70 or 80, which might be worth 100, but he still doesn't get the 100, right? And so you almost have to factor that in as well. But Joe Root is so interesting to watch, and the way he goes about cricket. Last Ashes, when Cummins was bowling to him, Cummins kept putting the fielder out at deep point, and Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne kept coming up and going, "Stop doing that. He's going to hit a single every single time. He's a machine." And you can hear them saying it into the mic. He's a machine, right? And Cummins is like, "Oh yeah, but we've got this plan of deep point." And they're like, "It doesn't work for Joe Root." Because what I love about him is he's almost algorithmic. And I think the problem with that is Cummins is also algorithmic. And so Cummins has an algorithm that matches quite well against Joe Root. So 2 tests, or maybe even 3 tests without Cummins, he's got a chance.
In a word, who wins the Ashes?
Australia.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the book again. And congratulations on making the long list again. So pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for putting me on the list.
As we sit here, it's mid-November, and later this month, the prize for William Hill Sportsbook of the Year will be announced. The shortlist is as follows: Finding the Edge by Sir James Anderson, Ultra Women by Lily Carter and Emma Wilkinson, State of Play by Miguel Delaney, The Last Bell by Donald McRae, Engulf by James Montague, Test Cricket by Tim Wigmore, The Escape by Pippa York and David Walsh. Some of those have been guests on this show. Foggy, terrific shortlist we've got going on there. The judges have got their work cut out, whittling that down to one single winner, haven't they?
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. There's 7 books this year. I was hearing from the chair the other week that it could have been 9 or 10 books on the shortlist because it's just been that close. So it's going to be an interesting debate to see who comes out on top.
And we shall find out. We've got a special live show from the awards ceremony on the afternoon of Tuesday, the 25th of November on talkSPORT 2. Me and the legend that is Danny Kelly, a former judge for the awards, will be your hosts. It should be a great occasion. Please join us for that. And thanks again to Jarrod Kimber and to Foggy as well. We'll see you next time on the William Hill Sportsbook Club.